Go back to the kitchen. I was playing some Marvel Rivals the other night, something I do regularly with a small group of friends. We've been gaming together for so long that we have our own shorthand. We know each other's gaming style, our favorite characters, which roles we like to play, and even the minor quirks in how each of us calls out danger or strategy. It's part of what keeps the game fresh for me. Even though we've logged countless hours tackling matches, we just have that synergy that makes the experience more fun, more lively. None of us take it so seriously that it stops being a game, but we do try to win and coordinate properly. So that evening, we queued up for a match. Just a standard play session. Sometimes you get a random set of teammates who are chill, friendly, or at least neutral. Then there are those times when you land that one person whose entire approach to communication is basically an excuse to be toxic. I've learned to tune it out over the years, but it can still be jarring. I'm not sure if they do it for shock value, if they're bored, if they're deeply unhappy, or if they genuinely think spewing hateful nonsense is a good time. But whatever the reason, it's a real part of the gaming landscape. This particular match started off as normal as could be. We were all picking our heroes, chatting about strategy, deciding who would roam, who'd guard certain objectives. Typical Marvel Rivals routine. Then one of my friends, he's openly gay, made a casual remark in voice chat about the build he was going for. Suddenly, this random guy, let's call him Toxic Dude, decided to chime in with homophobic comments. I won't repeat them word for word. Suffice it to say, they were the usual slurs you might hear from middle schoolers who've gotten too comfortable behind anonymity. It was an immediate mood killer, but we were used to this nonsense, so we mostly tried to keep our heads in the game. I genuinely wish I could say I was surprised, but I've seen it way too often. The phrase, average gamer, has taken on a bit of an edge these days because so many are used to that environment. Someone is always out there using slurs or insulting people's identities as though it's second nature. It's exhausting. Over the mic, I heard my friend take a sharp intake of breath and then sigh, deciding not to escalate. The rest of us also stayed quiet, letting the bigoted remarks pass. The best approach we'd learned was to keep comms for legitimate game talk and not feed the troll. The match got underway, and we tried to coordinate the usual strategy, controlling key map points, timing our combos, etc. That's when the insults started turning on me. I guess he noticed that I have a typically feminine voice or name. I didn't say much, but my gamer tag might hint at my gender. For some reason, he latched onto me. Out of nowhere, he just goes, "Go back to the kitchen." And I was like, wait, what year is this again? I swear, hearing "go back to the kitchen" in 2023, or any post-2015 year for that matter, feels like stumbling upon an ancient relic from the dusty old era of toxic internet culture that we all hoped was dying out. Are these guys stuck in a time loop? Could they not, at the very least, come up with something original? If you're going to be sexist, have a bit of creativity. Maybe craft a new insult that I haven't heard 100,000 times since 2010. For me, it was so cliché that it barely registered as an insult. I felt more annoyance at the unoriginality than anything else. Anyway, the phrase, "go back to the kitchen," rolled off his tongue like he'd practiced it 1,000 times. I was simultaneously unimpressed and slightly amused, but I did sense that if I fired back, the conversation might spiral into a juvenile shouting match. I considered responding with something witty, maybe referencing the fact that historically, kitchens are important strongholds of power. I can feed armies, sustain communities, and poison my enemies if I so choose. You know, but I also recognized that this dude just wanted attention, and giving it to him would be feeding the beast. I decided to do the grown-up thing. Ignore him. Let him wallow in his attempt at being edgy, or whatever he thought he was doing. So I turned my focus back to the game. I started calling out positions of enemies, cooldown timers, and potential ambush spots. My friends responded with callouts of their own. We tried to keep the synergy going. We basically pretended Mr. Hunt, "Go back to the kitchen," wasn't even there, hoping he'd get bored of hearing no reaction. But ironically, he didn't. Instead, he inserted himself into our conversations as if we were directing our strategies at him personally. For instance, I'd say something like, "He's heading top lane." Someone cut him off, and this guy would start replying, "Who's heading top lane? Are you talking about me? Why would I be heading top lane? Are you telling me to go top?" We'd ignore him, but he'd keep going. At one point, the enemies were stacking heavily around a certain objective, And I said, exasperated. Oh my God, can someone take him out already? He needs to go somewhere. I was clearly referring to the enemy hero who was messing up our push. Then he retorted, go somewhere. You want me to leave the match? It was so bizarre, like he was convinced all game chatter revolved around him, the self-proclaimed main character in a story that no one else was reading. I recognized it for what it was, an ego-driven attempt to remain in the spotlight. If he couldn't get it by being homophobic or sexist, he'd do it by being obtuse. By the time the match ended, and we lost by the way, hard to concentrate on strategy when we're dealing with nonsense on comms. My friends and I left the game lobby shaking our heads. We hopped into our private Discord channel to vent about the guy. That's when I shared what I wanted to say but held back. Go back to the kitchen. How about you go back into the womb, so you can remember the last time you felt the touch of a woman? That line spontaneously popped into my head the moment he said, go back to the kitchen. But I decided not to voice it during the game. I knew he wanted a reaction, so starve him of it, you know. My friend found my retort hilarious. Insisted I should have said it right then and there to put him in his place, but I explained that, in my experience, the best way to handle trolls is not to feed them, especially if they're craving negative attention. Engaging them just invites more nonsense. Sometimes, silence cuts deeper than any witty comeback, because it denies them the emotional payoff they're fishing for. Reflecting on it now, it's all a bit surreal. The phrase, go back to the kitchen, has become a meme in certain circles to mock sexism in gaming communities, a rhetorical artifact that's mostly used ironically or to poke fun at the outdated notion that women belong anywhere but on the battlefield or esports stage. Yet, there are still dudes who fling it around as though they're being edgy or rebellious. It's exhausting that we're still here. We've had so many discussions, articles, or attempts at better moderation. Some progress has happened, yes, but you jump into random matches, and you can see the old attitudes aren't extinct. They're hibernating, popping up at inopportune times. The conversation about gaming toxicity, sexism, homophobia. There's nothing novel about it. We've been talking about it for years, but each personal story, each petty remark, each ugly slur is like another data point. Some might say, just grow thicker skin, and I do have a thick skin. Clearly, I wasn't offended, just irritated and unimpressed. But consider someone who's new to the scene, or who's extra sensitive or vulnerable that day. Maybe that same comment becomes a tipping point, an emotional assault they just can't brush off. That's the real problem. It's not that one childish insult breaks the world. It's that repeated exposure to negativity can drive people away from gaming spaces or otherwise dampen the communal aspect that many of us enjoy. Another angle is the prevalence of mommy issues. I half-jokingly said that the guy must be riddled with them, but there's a kernel of truth. So much hostility in these chats seems to come from folks with unresolved personal traumas, insecurities, or unmet needs. They lash out at strangers, maybe because they lack healthy outlets or coping mechanisms. Not that it excuses them, of course, but it's a phenomenon, repeated over and over. A meltdown in a game lobby might signal deeper personal issues, but as random strangers, we can't fix that. All we can do is set boundaries or block, mute, or ignore them. The comedic side of it is that if he's so threatened by the idea of a woman playing a game, or any non-traditional gamer identity, he might not realize he's screaming into the void. The gaming world, once male-dominated in a public sense, is increasingly diverse. Women, LGBTQ, individuals, older adults, families, everyone is here. The old stereotypes of gaming is for teenage boys alone is long gone. Yet some men still cling to illusions, wanting to maintain that boys' club atmosphere. Telling me to go back to the kitchen is akin to painting "No girls allowed" on the treehouse in big childish letters. The world has moved on, but they're out there yelling at the rain, upset that it's not 2015, or 2005, or 1995. That said, I do appreciate the comedic potential in these scenarios. For instance, the next time someone says, "Go back to the kitchen," I might respond with a full-blown culinary plan. Yes, let me whip up a spectacular meal that'll leave you begging for my cooking and leadership, because if my strategic sense is good enough to coordinate a multiplayer match, imagine my organizational prowess in the kitchen. Or maybe I'll respond with a historical or anthropological take like, the kitchen is actually the center of domestic power. Don't you know that traditionally, people who control food control societies? So thanks for granting me authority over resources. Of course, That's if I feel the troll is worth any words. Usually it's just background noise. To circle back, the final punchline my friend liked was, "Go back to the womb so you can remember the last time you felt the touch of a woman." It's undeniably snarky, but it cuts deeper than kitchen cliches. It calls out that the guy might be starved for basic human affection. On reflection, that's a big possibility. Someone acting out like this might be lonely or socially starved. They project hostility, craving any form of acknowledgement, even negative. If they got healthy social bonds in real life, maybe they wouldn't be so invested in insulting strangers online. Alternatively, maybe they'd still be a jerk. Who knows? But these are the mind games that swirl in my head after a match like that. I wonder about the human behind the screen. What led them to that moment of petty bullying? But as I said, if he's lonely, that's unfortunate, but not my problem to fix. The best I can do is hold my composure, set an example, and maybe maintain some humor about it all. Because let's face it, the older I get, the less energy I have to get riled up by randoms on the internet. If you have a vile or insulting remark, I might laugh or roll my eyes. That's about the extent of my reaction. My mental health is not on the table for them to feed off. One could argue that ignoring hateful or sexist remarks doesn't solve the broader culture of toxicity in gaming. That's true. On a societal level, we might need better moderation tools, more robust reporting systems, or broader education. But in that instant, in the heat of a random quick match, it's every gamer for themselves. You do what you can to maintain your own sanity and ensure your friends have a decent time. We did just that. We stuck together, made jokes in private, finished the match, and parted ways with Mr. Go back to the kitchen. No illusions that we changed his mind. He might log into the next match and harass another female gamer, or another LGBTQ gamer. But at least he didn't rattle us. Nor did we degrade ourselves by stooping to the same level. We maintained some measure of dignity and humor. Looking forward, I guess the overarching lesson is that these comments are still out there. They haven't disappeared. The environment is better in some respects. More awareness, more folks speaking out. Some gaming communities have done wonders to foster inclusivity, yet pockets of archaic attitudes persist, especially in open lobbies. It'll probably remain that way for the foreseeable future. So if you're female or part of any group that trolls love to target, you either hone your comedic clapbacks or perfect the silent ignore strategy. Both are valid. Each has its place. In the end, ironically, it's a story worth telling precisely because of how unoriginal and mundane it is. That's the bizarre paradox. A random troll repeated an unimaginative sexist trope, and I responded by ignoring him in real time, then mocking him afterward with a witty line. The cycle continues. If nothing else, it's a reminder that while the gaming world has advanced in technology, certain mindsets remain stuck in the dark ages. But, hopefully, as each new wave of gamers enters the fray, more progressive, open-minded voices will drown out the regressive ones. One day, I dream Go Back to the Kitchen will be so archaic that people won't even know what it references, like some nonsensical phrase lost to the dusty corners of online history. Until that day, though, I'll keep playing, ignoring the nonsense, and cherishing the supportive circle of friends who make gaming worth it. We'll deal with the occasional troll, maybe even have a good laugh at their expense in private, because at the end of the day, we game for enjoyment, camaraderie, and the thrill of competition, not to feed the attention-seeking behaviors of folks stuck in an outdated timeline. And that's good enough for me.